Okay, so who is NoJetsTO? We are a nonpartisan citizens coalition. We are a grassroots group. We strive to protect the tripartite agreement. We oppose expansion of the island airport that would dominate our waterfront. We support the mixed-use vision of the waterfront. You know, Waterfront Toronto's been able to plan out like 10, 25, 50 years in the future and have an amazing vision for our waterfront. We want to protect that. We're not opposed to the current island airport as is, and not opposed to jets per se. It just, you know, we were telling Porter Airlines flying from Pearson, and they finally listened to us, and Porter's flying jets from Pearson. So we have, you know, this campaign's been going on for a long time, one way or another. Of course, it comes from one of the people who came up with some of the worst ideas for Ontario. Mike Harris first suggested jets at the island airport in 1996. And then Mel Lastman got City Council to vote for an airport bridge. And then David Miller got elected on a promise to kill that bridge. Victory number one. Then, you know, then Ports Toronto built a tunnel instead of a bridge, so they found a weasel way around that one. Then there was an island airport expansion push in 2013, and that's when NoJetsTO formed. And we spoke to residents from Mimico to Scarborough, all across Toronto, to fight that horrible plan for our waterfront. And in, you know, in 2014, City Council passed a reasonable motion that looked to a phased framework for expansion. You know, you had to pass through a whole bunch of gates for it to happen. But then the federal Liberals got elected in 2015, and we built enough ground support that they were able to say no jets at the island airport. And that was victory number two. And now here we are in March 2026, Premier Ford calls for jets, strips away all our environmental rights and protections from the island airport and the area around it, much like what he did at Ontario Place. Like, this is no trivial matter. All of our rights and protections are gone anywhere where Ford says, and that's a huge problem. I'm so glad the Ontario Place protectors are fighting that at Supreme Court. So Jane Jacobs said you have to win a fight 3 times. So if we win this one, it's going to be win number 3. So we're coming for it, Jane. Yeah, so it's impacting the waterfront vision. We have 17 million people visiting the central waterfront every year. 1.5 million people go to our, what is actually our crown jewel, the Toronto Islands. And, you know, and the waterfront's created 40,000 jobs, billions in ROI. We've invested billions, it's given us billions more back. And, you know, there's around 75,000 housing units planned for the East Waterfront at this point. So, big promise there, and that is the crown jewel. So Waterfront Toronto said, at what point does the island airport stop being an airport in a thriving, revitalized waterfront and becomes an airport overwhelming the waterfront? And that's when you add jets. So, so Waterfront for All, and there's that horror of Waterfront for All, they uncovered the environmental assessment that Toronto Port Authority did in 2016 and buried. So I'm pulling out some nuggets from that environmental assessment to show you as part of this presentation. And one of those things is the future scenario predicts 24 jet flights per hour. So that's a jet every 2.5 minutes. So this picture is not that far off. It's Lake Ontario, soon to be Pearson on the Lake. What does expanding the island airport look like? So here we have jet blast deflectors. So jet blasts go at about 190 kilometers per hour, and you can imagine dealing with that in your canoe, your sailboat, your ferry, anything that you go on the water. And there's also jet deflectors all across the sides there, you know, of an expanded runway, an expanded marine exclusion zone. So, you know, if you're at Hanlon's Point here, you're not going to be able to like look back at the city, and then vice versa from the city to Hanlon's Point. So it starts to even affect those sight lines as they build up this island airport. The jet blast barriers are supposed to be between 14 and 19 feet. And this is just a visual of what a jet blast looks like. So here's the jet blast, there's the jet blast barrier, and then here's all of the kind of ancillary winds still going 40, 50 kilometers an hour, producing odors, winds, and that's our central waterfront. So, not what we want. So these will definitely very badly affect boats. Anybody recreationally in the water, your life would likely be at stake in a canoe near the marine exclusion zone. This shrinks our central waterfront and introduces an element of danger that I don't think anybody recreationally enjoying our central waterfront deserves. The jet safety area also limits housing. So if you look here, these are zones where housing cannot be. You've probably heard of a few stories of buildings around Pearson where they were told, no, that building can't be 50 stories, it can be 20. Or your 5-story building needs to be 4 stories. So, when you start losing all kinds of stories off these buildings, the affordable housing immediately doesn't pencil, and the housing itself may not even pencil. So you've gone from 15,000 units to Villiers Island to potentially somewhere close to 0. This gives you an idea of some of the heights that might be imposed. So this is the new protective surface that has come into the new safety standards that's come in since the last time they called for jets. And at the bottom part of this range, you're looking at 15 stories. So, your housing in Villiers Island, which we're depending on for the affordable housing that we need in a housing crisis, may be completely unviable as a result of these jets. And Transport Canada can impose this, and all anybody can say is, okay. There's no, oh, are you sure? I mean, if a jet loses an engine, it climbs slowly, and that's why that sort of a narrow slope is needed. Or if it misses an approach when it tries to land, it's another scenario where you have to have a slope like that, which is a pretty tight slope to the water. The existing airport, they're turboprops, they're smaller, more maneuverable.
Existing buildings.
Oh, sorry, maybe I'll take that to the Q&A. Existing buildings, I don't know. It's not good. So, public health, increased risk. With jets, you have an increased risk of respiratory illness, lung cancer, lesions in the upper airway, nasal lesions, respiratory tract tumors, all the things you really don't want. That's for sure. So they're all increased with jets, and just making the environment, being on the central waterfront or living there, much less safe. There was a traffic report in the environmental assessment, and traffic could go up as high as 400% in the area of the airport. So it's pretty bad already if you go down there. Like, I feel awful for the kids who have to cross the street and go to the waterfront school. It is just going to be absolute gridlock and chaos. So 400%, that is a horrible, horrible traffic increase. To talk a little bit, there are plenty of birds that are observed at the island airport. Some are threatened, some are at risk. There's well over 100,000 that were spotted at the airport as part of this environmental assessment. The Lake Ontario is a migratory bird runway. There are millions of birds that traverse this, and jets and birds are far less compatible than turboprops and birds. Jet engines have a tendency to suck in birds, which is very not nice. When you have one going every 2.5 minutes, I just feel awful for these birds, some of which are threatened species. Next question. Where does the federal government stand on jets to the island airport?